that America will become a land sharing the fruits of the land, not for the favored few, not to satisfy greed, but that all may live in a land in which the Lord has provided an abundance sufficient for the luxury and convenience of the people in general. I think.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the ghost of Smedley Butler here with the ghost of Judge James Horton. How you doing, Judge?
I'm doing great, General. How are you?
Good, good. Today we're going to talk about some current events, specifically Robert Hunter Biden and his full and unconditional pardon.
The topic on everybody's lips.
So, as you know, this is the president's son who was indicted for not paying his taxes and for a federal gun charge in which he did not disclose on a form that he had a prior drug conviction or habitual drug use.
Habitual drug user.
Habitual drug use.
So do you want to start with the gun charge? Because I think that's the simplest of them to dispose of.
I want to start with the fact that this pardon goes all the way back to January 1st of 2014, all the way through December 1st of 2024. So that's a 10-year kind of sweeping pardon.
Boy, wouldn't I like to have a pardon for 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
You could deal with a bunch of, illegal things and it'd be all fine.
Do you think that just comes down to the length of the potential tax crimes? That it was more than 1 year, or do you think there's something else there?
I think there's something else there. I think, they drug him in front of Congress a couple of times for the Burisma stuff.
Yeah.
And that was in 2014, I believe. So, with this new FBI director that looks kind of...
Kash Patel, sketchy as hell.
Yes. I think Biden's trying to just go ahead and head that off at the pass and be like, good luck, doing anything.
Right.
I guess you can... I know they did it with Nixon.
The blanket pardon?
Yeah, the blanket pardon for a period of time. But I did not know you could do it for 10 years.
I don't think there's any limitations on the president's pardon power other than it be a federal crime. Obviously, Trump can't pardon himself for the New York State convictions for tax fraud.
But you can't do a future pardon, can you?
Well, that was one of the big questions at the end of the first Trump presidency is, can he issue himself a pardon for things that he hadn't been charged with yet?
Yeah, but it's a period of the acts happened in the past.
Right.
Can you go ahead and be like, oh, I'm gonna murder this guy. I'm gonna go ahead and pardon myself, and then I'm gonna go out and commit the crime.
In that case, absolutely not.
It does not, because you have to have a conviction or a guilty plea or something.
I think all you have to have is like prior past conduct. I don't even think you have to be charged.
You don't even have to be charged. Wow. I got to go back and read con law again.
Right. Well, they don't spend a lot of time covering the pardon power in con law because it's not really. I mean, there have been, and I've got a list here, several controversial, high-profile examples of pardon powers being used, and I think the most famous and egregious of which was Nixon being pardoned by Gerald Ford, which probably cost him re-election.
Yeah, I think that set a very poor precedent as far as presidential crimes, and especially with pardons and how that goes. If you had to guess, how many people has Joe Biden pardoned in his term so far?
200 or so, give or take. Shot in the dark?
No, it's only about 45.
Really?
Yeah, it was very low. Donald Trump pardoned 144. Now, toward the end of you get a lot toward the end of your presidency,
right? So
I expect Biden to really crank it up here and start issuing a bunch of pardons right before on his way out.
And that's especially interesting with the Trump administration's promise to prosecute political enemies as they come into office. Might be something that's necessary there in the eyes of the Biden administration.
Could you do a blanket pardon for a group of people? I think you have to specifically name.
You would have to specify, I think.
Yeah.
You couldn't just say all political enemies of Donald J. Trump. You would have to say, Merrick Garland or Jack Smith, the special prosecutor. Something like that. You would have to specify.
So, if Joe Biden decided to, just get a Xerox of pardons and name every federal employee to protect them from prosecution from Trump,
I think he could do that.
That would be wow. Okay. That would definitely be a way of handling. I mean, would that be an abuse of power?
Well, the same as any of these controversial pardons that we're going to talk about today, are any of those in abuse of power. And I think in most cases they all are. And I would even say, unpopular opinion, I've been getting killed for it on Blue Sky, but I think Biden pardoning Hunter, Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden as it relates to the tax charges, I think is an abuse of power. And we'll get into that later, because I think at first we need to sort of lay out the metes and bounds of what they say he did.
You read the indictment today, is that right?
That's right.
Can you tell me what that indictment said?
So the indictment I read was the tax case, but I would actually like to start with the firearm case because I think it's quicker, right?
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about guns.
We can dispose of the gun situation in just a few minutes. So he had no prior convictions of any sort of felony, which we all know if you've got a felony conviction, you can't own or carry a firearm.
Right.
Which the Supreme Court has recently upheld in a spate of cases post-Bruen. But what he's charged with is when you fill out the form for the background check, it asks if you have a drug addiction or you're a drug user.
Right.
He says no, and we all know that Hunter Biden has a well-documented problem with crack cocaine.
Right.
Likes to party a bit.
I've seen the pictures. They're fantastic.
You know, got his party drugs a little bit. And I mean, who amongst us, you know?
Yeah, cast that first stone over there, Judge.
Right. People who live in glass houses, you know. So, but in all seriousness, that's what he's accused of, is saying that he's not a drug user, when in fact he was when he legally purchased a firearm. I have never even heard of someone being prosecuted for that. Have I seen felons who got caught with weapons or people under a domestic violence protection order that got caught with weapons being prosecuted for being a certain person forbidden? Absolutely. Bet your ass I've seen that all the time. But I've never once seen someone charged for lying on that form. Ever.
I haven't bought a gun in a while, but I remember, you do the paperwork and you sign it under, penalty of whatever.
Right.
I guess that Hunter Biden got caught up in the penalty
of perjury.
Right. And they were really throwing the book at him, from my understanding, for not checking that box.
They were. And if you think about it, in this day and age, in the year of our Lord, 2024, as you like to put it, how many Americans, and if we put a percentage on it, we'd be pulling a number out of thin air, right? But how many Americans habitually use marijuana products these days?
I'm going to jump around for a second,
Sure.
But is that even legal given the recent Supreme Court ruling on handguns? And
so the most recent case that dealt with that was dealing with domestic violence protection orders, which are
Right.
civil orders. And the Supreme Court essentially said that if there's a finding of fact in that protective order that says that you're a dangerous person to the community and you shouldn't be allowed to have a firearm, then they can prohibit you from having them. So that at least sets up the fact that the Second Amendment is not an unfettered right.
Right. But I was thinking more along the lines of, was it the D.C. case?
Heller.
Yeah. Where they straight up said, no restrictions. You can't ban them from a municipality.
And then Bruen more recently. There was another Supreme Court case, Bruen, that dealt with sort of the same issue.
Yeah. It just kind of confirmed all those Second Amendment rights, which, that's fine. If the Supreme Court wants to rule on it like that, do it. I think there's a lot of gray zone in there that they're not addressing.
There's a lot, and especially post-Bruen, there's been a lot of Second Amendment litigation. There really weren't a ton of Second Amendment cases, but since Bruen came down, the NRA and these various gun rights groups have really been challenging where the line is.
Honestly, I don't know where it is, given the rulings of the court.
I don't know either.
So
But we'll find out, though. I'll guarantee you that.
I mean, can people that have previous drug use have firearms?
At the moment, the answer is no. Okay. And clearly based on the Hunter Biden conviction. And so the interesting thing would have been,
if he appealed it to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's say there wasn't a pardon. He appeals the constitutional right. It goes to SCOTUS eventually. And then then a conservative Supreme Court
has to rule that Hunter Biden could have that gun.
That
would have been fun.
It would have been fantastic.
They'd have probably kicked it down, but either way, that would have been hilarious to have watched.
It would have been. It would have been great. But so there's the gun issue, which, if we're going to argue that it's a political prosecution,
do you know how long they were asking for prison time?
I don't know exactly, but I think the maximum range of punishment was like 17 years.
17 years?
Yeah.
Oof.
And so I think the plea that was entered was non-binding. So it's going to be up to the judge, a Trump appointee, to ultimately impose that sentence.
Wasn't the special prosecutor also a Trump appointee as well?
So it's interesting. When you appoint a special prosecutor, they're supposed to come from outside the government. You're not supposed to be able to take a current DOJ employee and an assistant U.S. attorney and make them special prosecutor.
That's what Garland did in this
That's
case.
exactly what happened in this case, which was very unusual anyway. And yours and I's feelings on Merrick Garland are well documented. Can't stand the man.
That's why you never make a judge a lawyer.
Ever. With all due respect to all the judges we know and love.
Yeah, like you.
Right. So
he's got the gun issue.
right.
That's potentially 17 years.
Right.
Now he's got these unpaid taxes, which I looked over. It was like, I think $1 million over like 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, 1.5 million I think was the number,
1.5?
give or take.
Okay. And the IRS was going after him for not paying those taxes. That's a lot of taxes. You got to pay your taxes.
Right.
So Hunter Biden doesn't pay his taxes for, I think, 3 years.
For several years, 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
Don't hold us to the numbers, but several years. Which could account for the broad range of that pardon, right?
Right. He gets popped. I think he pays it back.
He pays some of it back.
Pays some of it back. He doesn't quite pay all of it back.
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Because that was part of the allegation in the indictment, was that he owed these back taxes and that he wasn't paying them.
Oh, okay.
And now keep in mind, indictments are just that. They're allegations. They're not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They're not any proof. They're not any evidence. But I think if law and order in this country means anything, it means that when you enter a guilty plea to an indictment, right, to an allegation, to a charge leveled in an indictment, then legally, in the eyes of the law, that's what you did.
Well, can we? He did attempt to make a plea deal on all of this.
Yeah,
and
global resolution.
and it blew up day of, which I've never heard of. Like, plea deals are usually hashed out weeks in advance by the prosecutor and the defense attorney, and they usually know what they're talking about.
Usually have their I's dotted and their T's crossed before you
Right.
come in.
So for them to walk into the courtroom and be like, "Oh, I don't know what happened," that seems to be a little disingenuous, and I think it possibly caught the defense attorneys off guard.
Super unusual. And in my experience, everybody in this country, I don't care who you are, if there's a way, and this is going to sound bad, right? But if there's a way for your job to be easier than it might otherwise be, you're going to take that. If it doesn't mean cutting corners or doing anything that you're not supposed to do. I think we all would. And in my experience, for judges accepting plea deals, it's exactly that. Excellent. There's one less case on my docket that I have to pollute my calendar with. I am happy as hell to get rid of this case. And then that judge balks at it, questions it, and I've seen conflicting reports about what actually happened there. I've seen some reports that say the judge rejected the plea deal, and I've seen some reports that say the judge questioned it and then the prosecutor withdrew it. Now, both of which are Trump appointees, so there's certainly smoke there.
Well, there was what I read is there was a fight between the attorneys over whether or not it was a global deal that included the taxes and the gun charge. And the prosecutor was like, no, this is just for the taxes. They're like, no, we talked about this months ago. This is forever. This is a global plea deal. We're not going to do a ad hoc, plea deal for this and that. And then I think the judge was like, well, y'all clearly haven't, discussed this, so I'm going to reject the plea deal since no one can figure it out.
Well, the judge actually used language rubber stamp. You're essentially asking me to rubber stamp this plea deal, and so the judge had questions, and then it blows up. So the judge certainly had some agency there, but I think the state and the defense.
I mean, the judge is supposed to rubber stamp a plea deal.
That's kind of how it works, right?
Yeah, that's their job. Is if the state says, yeah, we've got a deal on the table, the judge can't come back and be like, well, I don't know, I don't like this deal.
And they do occasionally, but it's pretty rare. Especially, so if you put yourself in the position of the judge, you sure, you're serving for life, but you're in a politically volatile situation. You've got the sitting president's son coming before you as a defendant, and you have the opportunity to get rid of this case. Goes away. And you can pass the buck to the government and the defense if anything ever blows back. They came to me, they agreed, so who am I to disagree? And the judge determined not to do that. That in and of itself is a little fishy to me. That was the easy out.
Yeah. And plus, it kind of kept this investigation going for like the House investigative committee. I think they were trying to drill into more of the Burisma stuff and try to, link Joe Biden to all that.
Right.
I haven't seen any evidence that there's anything there.
They've been trying that for a decade.
That's maybe why he wants to go back till 2013.
Well, in some of these tax issues in the indictment, the earliest they start mentioning them is 2015.
Okay.
So I think it could be that, absolutely. Could Burisma play a role? They're referenced in the indictment that he's on the board there, and that's part of the unclaimed income, or that's part of the income that he was getting that goes into the total. But it could be as innocent as he's just not claiming enough on his taxes or hiding some income here. And which rich person that we've ever heard of doesn't do that on a regular basis? I mean, hell, Trump was convicted in New York for lying on forms.
He did the same thing as Hunter Biden did, just with state income tax.
Right.
So Hunter Biden gets convicted by a jury on the gun charge and the tax charge.
So the tax charge he actually pled to.
He pled guilty.
He pled guilty to those, to all counts. And you were asking about the length of the sentence. There are several counts, and so they can be ran concurrently or consecutively. So the judge theoretically could have stacked them up end to end and given him a shitload of time. Now, is that likely? It's not. But is it a possibility? Sure.
So I believe the sentencing date was coming up here in January.
Coming up soon.
And President Biden took it upon himself just to go ahead and pull the trigger, granting a full pardon to his son. None of these crimes were violent.
Right.
Every single one of them was procedural and or hiding taxes. I believe most Americans have engaged in some sort of tax fraud.
Even little things. Taking tips under the table, or paying somebody cash for your yard work, right? Where they don't claim it, nobody claims it.
Too many deductions.
Right.
Granted, his was a little more excessive, claiming, maybe he should have gotten a better accountant, better tax lawyer.
Right. Well, and some of the allegations are that he didn't file them, and that even later on when he did file them, he didn't pay the amount that he owes. And what they're saying is that he could, in fact, do that. He had millions of dollars of income, and he basically blew it on hookers and blow and fast cars and nice clothes.
Right. Which I get.
Right. I mean, if you're going to blow your money, there are worse places to throw it away.
Yeah. Live fast and hard. Deal with the consequences later.
Hashtag Hunter Biden story.
Especially when your dad could pardon you.
Right.
So
the question for me, based on everything he's charged with, considering that there's never been the child of a sitting president prosecuted for a crime, Joe Biden in the pardon statement says, look, this was a politically motivated persecution, not a prosecution. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's close to what he said.
Right.
What evidence for and against that is there in your mind?
I think the aggressiveness on the gun charge was a little much. I don't see a lot of federal prosecutors seeking that and going after that.
I've never seen someone charged for that.
If he wasn't the sitting son of a president, I think no federal prosecutor would have given two whoops about that. The IRS, I'm feeling probation.
I think there's certainly more merit to the IRS case.
Yeah, he definitely cheated on his taxes. That's fine, but I don't know if it amounts to, all this investigative and jail time.
I agree.
You pay what you owe and you go on your way. I
agree, and I think, to jump into my own question here, considering that we've never had the child of a sitting president prosecuted, and we have two relatively mundane, especially the gun charge, but nonviolent, little light tax fraud that basically every wealthy person in America commits, is the fact that Hunter Biden's the first sitting president's child to be prosecuted, and it's done under a Trump judge and a Trump prosecutor, is that not in and of itself suggestive that there's a political motive?
I don't think so. But that being said, the MAGA wing of the Republican Party has definitely started to target political enemies. They specifically said so as much. And, listening to Jim Jordan on the House, whatever committee he's on, it's very clear he doesn't really care about getting to the truth of anything. It's all about scoring political points and hurting my political enemy.
I mean, he certainly doesn't want you to get to the truth of his sexual assault cover-up either, but that's neither here nor there.
We're not talking about his time in Ohio and those little boys.
Right.
We're talking about his time in D.C. and him covering up issues in D.C. because he failed to show up for a House subpoena for the January 6th.
Yeah.
He was in violation of a
and then he
congressional House subpoena.
And then in the House Investigative Committee, he tried to call someone out, and I forget who it was, for failing to show up for the subpoena, and like the entire House laughed at him. It's like, are you kidding me?
Like if you're gonna try to enforce those rules, you need to be able to abide by them. But
right? Hypocrisy is the order of the day.
Rules don't matter anymore. So
rules for thee, not for me.
So that's why I think there may be some political prosecution here, based on they couldn't get to Joe Biden, so they're going to go after his son who's an addict. Now, granted, a lot of this is on Hunter Biden for being a massive piece of shit,
right?
And like getting in all this trouble,
and that's not in dispute, right? Like Hunter Biden was a drug addict. Hunter Biden lied on his taxes. And I think even if you want to come back and push back on that, when someone pleads guilty to something, if we have facts in this country, if convictions mean anything, it means you accepted the facts in the indictment. Yeah. And so he did those things.
I feel bad. I feel bad for Joe Biden because his other son died in a car wreck.
Absolutely, and I want to
got this other screw up kid out there just making your life a living hell.
And that provides a nice segue, right? So we know what happened. We know loosely what he's charged with. We've talked, putting whether or not it's a politically motivated aside, I think the next question for me, and they're twofold, and we'll deal with the first one first, is the human element of it. A father worried about his son. Because I don't think you can, because like the next question becomes, should he have done it, right? And I think the first element is that. We've got a dad looking out for his kid. How does that resonate with you?
Well, Trump pardoned his daughter's husband's father.
Right.
Kushner. And
I've got a whole list of famous presidential pardons. And that's at the top.
Apparently he's going to appoint him ambassador to France.
Right. Right. And do you know what the man was?
Pull him out of prison and put him into Paris.
Oh, prison to Paris. I love the alliteration. Do you know what he was actually accused of? Kushner?
I want to say it's financial crimes.
Oh, it's great. So he was originally charged with financial crimes. He pled guilty to filing false tax returns. Sound familiar?
No.
I know. So his sister was a cooperating witness with the government. And to get back at her, he hatches a scheme where he hires a prostitute to seduce her husband and film him having sex with the hooker to get back at the sister. So he also gets hit with tax. So he gets it all in total. He gets hit with tax evasion, lying to the Federal Election Commission, and retaliating against a federal witness. So that's what he got pardoned for. Ivanka's father-in-law.
So that's a little more aggressive than not paying your taxes.
That's pretty damned aggressive. I mean, we got federal witness tampering here against your own sister, right? Like you're trying to honeypot your brother-in-law. Like you can't make that shit up.
Do we have pictures of this hooker just for for the file?
God, I swear to God, if I find a picture of the hooker, we're gonna post it on the website.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look. But where were we? We were on a human level.
Yeah, pardoning your own family, this is unprecedented as far as presidential pardons go. I mean, I get it. Like
you said, Bo had already died. He's this is his second son. I think his youngest son. And then what happens if you don't pardon him? You leave him at the mercy of the Justice Department of a man who's your avowed political enemy and has sworn retribution.
Yeah.
I understand from a human perspective how strong those inducements, how strong that pull might be.
The way this all should have gone down is that Hunter Biden should have taken the plea deal, or there should have been a plea deal on the table. Hunter Biden takes the deal, gets fined, pays everything back plus some extra, gets slapped with probation for what 5 to 7 years probation,
right. However long. But point is, doesn't go to prison for it.
Right. I don't feel like these are prison crimes. But either way, the MAGA side of the Republican Party is now up in arms screaming that this is a travesty and abuse of power and yada, yada, yada. And, but where were these people when Paul Manafort was pardoned, or Michael Flynn?
Roger Stone.
Yeah, or any of these people that committed election interference, bribery, witness tampering, not to mention Trump's pledge to pardon the January 6th, treason actors that stormed the Capitol to overthrow the election. Like,
it's certainly rank hypocrisy on the part of the Republicans calling this out, being up in arms about it.
I don't want to call this is not Republicans, because there are good Republicans out there that follow the rule of law and are good American citizens. This is not Republicans. The Republicans that I know.
Right.
This is more like a MAGA.
It's a MAGA problem.
Yes. Where rules don't matter, might makes right.
Right.
And get out of my way, I'm going to be a complete a-hole, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I've seen this affect everyday people in my life. Like, the entitlement of people, like in the Starbucks checkout line, is getting out of control. People live in their own little bubbles and have the lack of courteousness that I've seen is incredibly low. But that's a problem we're going to discuss later, about just how people are so absorbed on their phones, and it's all about me, that when real life hits them in the face, they don't know how to act.
Right.
And lash out and act like a Karen.
Oh, the Karen epidemic is real. But to bring it back, I think we certainly see why this was a difficult choice for Biden. But the why, I don't think he should have done it. Right. The why I think politically.
Well, there's also, he promised everyone he wouldn't do it.
That's true.
He straight up said, I'm not going to do it. I mean, don't get out there and make that promise if you're going to go back on it.
I agree. And even if his reason, because he lied about it. He absolutely did.
Yeah.
His reason for lying was he didn't want to hurt Kamala Harris in the general election campaign. He didn't want to give her something else of his to have to explain. And I understand that. But where it comes in for me is your duty as president of the United States supersedes that for me. And I sit here from a place of privilege where I've never been put in that position with my own kids.
Right.
But for me, your duty to the country outstrips your duty to the family, your duty to everyone else, right? You, first and foremost, are the president of the United States, and everything else comes second.
Right.
And that's where the problem comes in for me, is, in my mind, and I'd love to get your thoughts, a blanket pardon for the January 6th defendants would be an absolute travesty. Those people stormed the Capitol, attempted to interfere with the certification of a free and fair election, literally killed
police officers,
literally committed treason against the country. And what this does, what Joe Biden does in doing this, is he makes it next to impossible not next to impossible, but much more difficult than it would have otherwise been to point that out for the abuse that it is.
But will you agree with me that Trump would have done it anyway?
Absolutely. But that's not the point for me.
I know, but I'm empathetic towards the president and pardoning his son because it does seem to be politically motivated because of who the kid is.
Right.
You know, if that would have been...
Would some other random rich kid have been charged for that? The answer is probably not.
No. So...
Would you and I be charged for that? The answer is no.
Hell no. No, I'm too charming to be charged like that.
That's a fact.
So, given the, you know, all that, I hear what you're saying, and it's going to be difficult.
It's going to take a lot of the sting out of it.
I mean, you can still hammer the fact that these are violent acts. I look at most of these presidential pardons. I ran through a bunch of them in the past. All of them are like nonviolent, you know, drug possession,
right?
You know, stuff like that. None of them are like Cap One murder, you know, pedophilia, rape.
You said something interesting to me earlier before we got started that really resonated with me. You said, let's look at what the impact on the country is if these acts that these people were accused of are carried out. What's the impact on Hunter Biden's gun charge? The answer is nothing. He's not a violent criminal. He's not accused of trying to use it to kill anybody. What happens if the tax situation's ever found? The answer is the federal government doesn't get $1.5 billion it's owed, which in a $1 trillion+ federal budget is a raindrop in a lake.
Right.
What happens if the January 6th defendants are able to carry out their goal of hanging Mike Pence or whatever?
There's a politically motivated murder.
Potentially a civil war.
Yeah. I mean, the fall of the U.S. Constitution, democratic society, Western alliances.
The end of the American experiment.
Yeah. All that comes down because one jackwagon was like, I didn't lose.
And so I do think there's a big damn difference, is what I'm saying. I think you're right there. But I also think it makes it easy for that disingenuous MAGA wing of the Republican Party to say, "Nuh-uh, he did it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Nothing to see here. This is politics as usual these days."
Yeah, I understand that, but there's no way they're going to do that anyway.
They are.
They're going to be disingenuous. They're going to lie. They're going to any type of ammunition they get, they're going to use relentlessly, often, and early. So, by that, I understand that. But on a human level, yeah, I get it. I get why he did it. But did it harm the country? And overall, I think so.
That's where I'm at too.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he put his duty, his feelings and duty as a father above his feelings and duty as a president.
But I think that's a politician. Like, politicians are selfish in nature.
They are.
It
was 100% was a selfish act. Put his family above country.
Yeah.
I mean, what's done is done, and certainly pardoning Hunter Biden is not as significant as the pardons of Manafort, of Stone, of, you know, you even mentioned it.
I mean, Manafort worked for the Kremlin to get Kalimnik, or I can't remember, the former president of Ukraine that got deposed by the Maidan uprisings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that guy flirting with treason. But, you know, him and Roger Stone, who says, you know, use anything to get elected. You know, him and his, was it the Brooks Brothers rebellion down there in Florida?
Yeah. All those are more egregious. And I think we should do an entire episode in the 2020 election at some point, because I think at this point it's one of these watershed moments in American history. But all of those, in my mind, are more egregious. And I think there's room in the discussion for nuance.
Yeah. But Trump's going to come in immediately and start whipping out pardons for everybody. So we'll see how that goes.
Speaking of pardons, before we move on from this topic, do you want to address some of the. Let me run through this list I've come up with of famous presidential pardons.
Yeah, let's see what we got.
Excellent. So, going in reverse chronological order, we've talked about the Trump pardons. We talked about Charles Kushner and his, his trying to honeypot his brother-in-law with a hooker and videotape it.
Right.
And that's your, as you said, your new ambassador to France, ladies and gentlemen. We got Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Stone for lying to Congress, witness tampering, obstruction in connection with the Trump-Russia probe. Manafort got 7 years in prison for bank and tax fraud. Again, where have we seen this before? Obama's big controversial one was pardoning Chelsea Manning. Do you remember her?
The WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one that outed like the NSA and like that they were spying on American citizens.
Yeah.
Dropped it to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and got like 35 years in prison for it. And Obama just commuted the sentence, made it way shorter. Didn't just turn her loose or pardon her, just commuted the sentence. And you know, most of, because Obama was like the pardoner in chief, if you remember, he did like thousands of them.
He pardoned a lot, but most of them, if I remember correctly, were nonviolent, like drug uses,
like those miscarriages of justice from the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Clinton gets interesting. So
he had a stepbrother, I think,
his half brother.
Yeah.
So that is a presidential relative that's been previously pardoned, and it was Bill Clinton coming in there for his half brother Roger, who was sentenced to more than a year in prison for pleading guilty to selling cocaine to an undercover police officer.
Good for him.
Right?
See, why do we really, destroy the young entrepreneur?
Right. And he's just trying to make a buck. That's the American dream, trying to hit a lick, Let's see.
I think I'm going to The Wire. I think every time, out there hustling the streets.
That's it, man. That's how you make a living.
Yeah.
Let's see. Clinton also had one in the final hours of his administration. He pardoned a commodities trader, Mark Rich, who had fled to Switzerland after being indicted in 1983 on evading millions of dollars in taxes and illegal trading with Iran while it held American hostages. Which... So for Clinton, he's got two questionable ones, including one he's related to. But that last one with Iran leads nicely into H.W. Bush, who granted 6 full pardons for Reagan administration officials and their roles.
Was Oliver North in there?
I think he might have been for their roles in Iran-Contra.
Yeah, I think Ollie North was in there.
I think he was.
Yeah.
And so...
Do you know who that attorney general was under H.W. that...
Only because you told me.
Yeah, Bill Barr.
Bill Barr.
All that investigation died.
So that was actually what was alleged in the press, is that when Bush pardoned all those Iran-Contra folks from the Reagan administration, that was the final act in the cover-up.
Maybe, but
because Bush was in that administration.
Yeah. Well, see, here's the wild thing about being pardoned. If you're pardoned, you can't plead the Fifth, and you're forced to testify.
Right.
Since there's no longer any Fifth Amendment protection.
That's true.
So
you got no right to protect.
Yeah. So if they pardoned all those people, then Bill Barr could have forced them to testify about everything they knew about Iran-Contra, but he didn't because
that ain't happening.
Whatever.
Right.
I guess we can't. Oh no.
So two other, and then of course we got the most controversial one, which is Gerald Ford pardoning Nixon for Watergate. Right. Ford was Nixon's vice president. Pardons Nixon ostensibly to heal the country and move past it. But two other ones I want to address is what I've seen bandied about online forums, be it Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, you name it, any of the microblogging
What's
sites.
Twitter?
I know. Oh, X. God, I hate that. I will never call it X.
I wish I had a bazillion dollars to buy a social media platform and kill it.
Yeah, about to say buy it and rename it Smedley.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Welcome to smedley.com.
Right. So the two that I want to address is I've seen allegations that H.W. Bush pardoned his son Neil, who until today I didn't know that a Neil Bush existed, if I'm being frank with you.
Yeah.
I thought it was just Jeb and W, but turns out
there's Neil in there.
Turns out H.W. and Barbara were a fertile bunch.
I think there's a daughter in there too.
There are a couple daughters. They're like 5 total Bush kids from HW. So Neil was involved in a banking scandal out of Colorado. Like a bank failed, and he was on the board, and may or may not have known
Just
some
in all
things.
those savings and loan type of stuff.
It's like Silverado savings and loan or something like that.
Yeah.
Cost the American people $1 billion to bail out the bank. At the time, it was like the largest banking scandal in American history. There were a lot of allegations floating around that H.W. Bush pardoned him, but I've not been able to find anything concrete substantiating that. Even going to like whitehouse.gov and checking pardon lists, I never found Neil Bush on it. But I did find some articles on Hunter Biden from some more obscure places, like the Hindustan Times, for example, which I don't put any stock in whatsoever, where they allege that happened. And the same was true for Jimmy Carter. He had a brother, Billy.
I remember Billy Carter, and
Carter.
He had some beer. They called it Billy beer.
Billy, yeah, that's exactly it. And so Billy, I don't remember exactly what Billy got in trouble for. One of these folks was basically soliciting pardons from like various drug dealers. I don't think that was Billy, but it was the same thing for him. Those were examples that were held up of presidents pardoning family members, and I wasn't able to substantiate either one of those, and I looked hard.
Right. I was wondering, like, what were the pardons after the Civil War? I know.
I didn't go back that far.
I know.
If I'm being honest with you.
I was just trying to think of like historical pardons and whatnot. Yeah, I know. I did read where
Lincoln pardoned like Mary Todd Lincoln's cousin.
did he?
Yeah,
Okay.
I read that one.
Just looking up all the family.
Yeah,
pardon
all the
history.
family pardons, because that was obviously going to be the question that is unprecedented, and it honestly,
It is and it isn't.
right, because this idea that Trump is not quote unquote family with Kushner's dad is bullshit, right?
You're pardoning the in-laws.
Right, you're pardoning the in-laws, and then the same with Clinton's half brother
Yeah.
for coke dealing.
I think, pardoning, but like Biden has never pardoned like his campaign manager or like,
Right.
People that work directly underneath him that were involved in campaign finance fraud or, covering up, lying to investigators on the Mueller investigation.
Oh, I agree that Stone, Manafort, and company are way worse. But the point is, the Trump pardons were more egregious, and they were more serious crimes.
Like if Trump pardoned somebody for getting busted for having a bag of weed on them, okay,
Yeah,
all
big
right.
deal. Victimless crime.
Tax evasion for a cousin or something like that. All right, I get it.
And the Kushner pardon from Trump was less egregious than like Stone and Manafort. and
I'll
company.
agree with that. Even with the hookers,
And even then, what Kushner did, I think, is more egregious than what Hunter Biden did.
easily. But the egregiousness of the crime, I think it matters.
I do too.
I think pardon somebody for violence that has committed a violent crime is way worse. And if the January 6 people are pardoned for their violent actions, I think that is unprecedented.
I agree. And that'll be one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in American history, if you want my 2 cents.
Well, we'll find out. We'll find out here in a few months.
Sooner rather than later.